Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and how to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. We have dedicated our lives to helping companies grow and scale. And those companies include all sorts of companies, whether it's a bakery down the road, technology companies all the way around, companies that make parts for RVs. Our listeners go far and wide. Military aerospace companies, you name it. We have reach in all kinds of spaces. But one of the conversations that we've been having lately with some of our customers is the idea of that they either are or are not a technology company. So we wanted to kind of approach this on a very on the table framework. We're going to take a look at what that means and why you should really consider what you are. And so, Adam, I'm going to throw that in your direction, and you can start with the first pitchfork.
Okay. So I was recently contacted by a company, and they said that they were an intermediary, that they were a matchmaker between companies, other companies, and consultants. And they had a client that was interested in having somebody lead a strategy project for them. And so that was what they came in over the transom. Never heard of the company, and I never found out who the client was. But there was in the process, I was asked this interesting question. They said, well, do you do work with tech companies? And I found myself pausing and saying, what's a tech company? Because if you think about it, right now, probably the most famous tech companies out there are Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Tesla. Maybe Microsoft should be in that too. And look at what they do. Facebook is a media company, right? It's a publisher. It publishes information. Apple is, has these devices, okay, but they're phones. We used to call that telecommunications back in the day, right? The telephone. Amazon is primarily a retailer, right? They're out there. The biggest bulk of their revenues come from retailing off goods. Netflix is a company that sells entertainment, right? Google makes almost all of its money, almost all of its revenue come from ad sales. So if you start looking at these companies, Tesla sells automobiles, it sells solar panels for your house, it sells battery systems for your house. It has something called the Boring Company, which drills massive boring holes underground, and then they certainly have SpaceX, right, which is putting satellites into space. So it really does beg the question: what's a tech company, right? How do you determine somebody is a tech company? And I thought about this a bit, and I remember that all the way back in 2012, 10 years ago, I wrote a column for Forbes in which I said, all companies have to think of themselves as tech companies. And I was looking for the article. I was trying to find it. Can I have a link to it real quick at hand? And I typed, every company needs to be a tech company. And I was astounded in that my article didn't pop up. What popped up, though, were articles from 2021 and 2020, and they were by the editors at Wall Street Journal. They were by the editorial board of Forbes magazine. They were by a lot of different newsworthy organizations like that, and they had almost identical titles to mine. You have to think of yourself as a tech company. I was kind of amused that people were coming around to this discussion a decade after I had written the topic for Forbes before. But it still is, it's interesting because you sit there and say to yourself, when you go to evaluate your company or any company, what are you using to evaluate it? Is it the products you sell or the solutions you sell? Or is it the business model that you have? Does your business model make you into a tech company? What is it that would make somebody into a tech company is what is really on my mind. And my conclusion is that we all have to think that we're tech companies.
Yeah.
I don't think you can avoid it. I gave you some names of earlier ones. I had an experience working with a great company a few years ago called Smart Data Solutions in the Minneapolis area. And Smart Data had developed a mailroom business where they took claims information that came in the U.S. Postal Service mail and opened the envelope, scanned the documents, and put the documents into a database. Over time, though, what had happened was they increasingly wanted to help their customer reduce the cost of handling all this information. And they had started to develop machine learning systems, and then they got into artificial intelligence. They were pretty good at guessing what the data was, guessing where it ought to go, guessing how it would be used. And they were also very good at solving problems, like when data would be misclassified. And so when they were talking to me, they were saying, well, we're a mail processing company. And it took me about, an hour to sit down with them and say, you open a lot of envelopes, but what you do that's valuable is how you handle this data.
Right.
It's the machine learning algorithms that you've developed that were actually better than humans. When you use the workflow that they created, it made better decisions, it routed data better, it cut costs, it did all kinds of wonderful things because the algorithms were better than the human mind on these data problems that were pretty much binary problems that had to be resolved. And here they were sitting with 10 people, great engineers that had developed this software, but they still kind of thought the focus of the company was around opening envelopes. And, once we reoriented and started saying, no, that's just a step that we take or something we do, but the real value comes from this technology that we've created. And I think people just underestimate how incredibly important this is in every single business out there.
Yeah, absolutely agree. One of the things that we talk with companies with is the idea, we had mentioned this, every company needs to become a media company as well, as far as getting the word out. And so where do you draw the line, right? A company making software middleware that they sell to other companies, that's obviously a tech company. Uber, really, is it really a tech company? It's just basically a glorified dating app. One side is drivers, one side is passengers. And even companies that have a product like muffins, they're going to take orders online. They're going to accept Zelle and Venmo. They're going to find ways to get their message through social media. So absolutely correct. So, we're a tech company here at Spark Partners, right? We engage with our customers in social media. We use all these tech mediums to be able to communicate with our viewers and listeners. Absolutely.
So if you wanted to clock back 30 years ago, I was at the DuPont Corporation doing business development. And DuPont, the biggest part of their business was chemicals and selling chemicals. But they had a number of other businesses as well. And so I was working with them and trying to think about what was it that was at the core of DuPont. And we started going around and realizing that the engineers and the scientists at DuPont were massive users of computers. And we had gone to supercomputer conferences. Now, supercomputers is like a dead thing. Nobody talks about it anymore. But a long time ago, they used to say, well, you had PCs and you had mini computers, you had mainframes, you had these supercomputers. And Cray out of the Minneapolis area had the famous Cray XMP that could do all this processing of calculations very, very quickly. And that was like the founder of the supercomputer. But then there were other multiple people that got into the business over time. And the largest owner and user of supercomputers wasn't the federal government. It was surprising to learn as we were in the 80s and the 90s that the largest buyer and user of supercomputers was actually Walmart. And Walmart had at the time developed a lot of algorithms around understanding demand for products so they could figure out inventory management, their distribution centers, how to staff inside the stores, how to anticipate inventory drawdowns so that they could run this very, very lean, very, very efficient retail organization. And at the time, they were by far and away, they were the killer out there. They were They were destroy. People that disliked them said they destroyed small towns because they would go into a town and open a Walmart, and the people, the original retailers couldn't stand the competition. Other people loved them because the prices, no matter where they went, the prices went down and the offerings went up. But here they had this big use of these supercomputers. Now, interestingly, you didn't probably know that story. Very few people knew that story because they never told anyone. Walmart didn't run around saying, hey, we're the largest user of supercomputers and our bottom line benefits from all this tremendous technology we use. They didn't say that. They kind of kept it hidden. And then let's compare that with what happened at Amazon. So Amazon, it gets started, and they're writing code, and they're out there figuring out how to be online. But they started to figure out what we now call the cloud. And they started saying, okay, we can put all this stuff in the cloud, we can manage it. And they're building it for their own use, in that they wanted to have retailers could come on, set up a storefront, access the cloud, keep track of the information, that kind of a thing. But instead of just making the cloud that they were creating an Amazon-only product, they opened it and said, hey, everybody could use this, and we now call that Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And and so now whenever people evaluate Amazon and they try to figure out what's the company should it be worth, is it a growth company? When the analysts are doing that sort of work, they look at the pieces differently. They'll say, okay, over here is the Amazon selling product, and there's a certain model used for that. And over here is AWS, and how fast is it growing, and what are the profit margins in that business? And so what we see is that Walmart was a tech company. It used this technology to figure out how it could grow and become this nationwide retailer that was just extraordinarily powerful. But it didn't sort of own up to that. And it kept itself locked into thinking of itself as a retailer. And as such, as technology evolved, why didn't they go out on the internet? Well, they kept themselves stuck in the way they were thinking. Rather than saying, hey, the internet's just another way to reach customers, and let's go ahead and reach out and see what we could do. So they were slow to make that adjustment. And on the other side, though, we see Amazon, which embraced technology, said we're going to have to use technology to get better at dealing with our customers. And by the way, if we've got good technology, why don't we sell it to somebody else? And I think that's the pathway that I'm trying to, with you, encourage our clients to start thinking, is that how you got into the business, or even what you sell as a solution, what your customers buy, may not be the real value that you provide. The value you provide may come from, figuring out how to apply technology in some way that's very, very beneficial to them. I always say that my experience with Amazon changed dramatically about 15 years ago when I was doing a remodel on a house. And I would go out to find products. And if I would buy something like, say, I remember I bought a faucet. And as I bought the faucet, Amazon quickly came back to me and said, oh, but do you need these valves? And I had no idea what was going on. Yeah. But the reality was the manufacturer of the faucet knew that if you were going to install it, unless it was a replacement, you needed these extra valves that go behind the wall. And so here Amazon started telling me what I needed to make that faucet work. And when I realized that they could do that, I started paying a lot more attention to my buying patterns and the recommendations that they would make. At first, because my thought process was, I don't need you telling me what I want. That kind of, I thought that was bad. But then I realized that, in fact, they were looking at patterns that I didn't have time to think about. I didn't have time to pay attention to, right? And I was trying to make quick decisions and move on. And now it does simplify my life a lot. I buy stuff on Amazon because of the fact that it does pick up on the patterns and sees what I buy, and it makes recommendations. Recently there was a product that I had bought on Amazon, and I enjoyed the product a lot. It was a food product, and I consumed it very, very quickly, much quicker than I anticipated. When I went back to buy it again, then Amazon said, well, this is the one you bought, but here's a 4-pack, and it's at a lower price point. And it recommended that to me because of how quickly I had come back for the repeat purchase. And I did buy the 4-pack because after I looked at it for a couple of minutes, I realized, I am going to use this product now going forward. I'm going to consume it for at least, a couple of months. It'll be a fad that I'll enjoy. I might as well get the lowest price on it. So that's that thinking for me that makes the Amazon platform such a great place. And again, same thing kind of happens with Netflix when it recommends to me the shows that I would want to watch, right? So based upon the power. Now, I'm not a big user of entertainment. The TV is off most of the time when I'm around. And if I'm home alone, most evenings I would probably listen to music more than I would watch television. But Mary Lou is a big consumer of entertainment. And so for her, she found, Netflix was a really, really good place to go. But now she's started to tap into these other platforms like Roku, right? They're doing the same thing now, and they're making recommendations, and it's expanding her universe of shows that she can watch. So a lot of these are older shows that aren't available on the Netflix platform. So Netflix pioneers this technology, then somebody else copies the technology. But that, if you look at it, you say, well, Roku, you got to call them a tech company. You have to call them a tech company, right? Because what they're doing, but all they're selling is media, right? They're just selling entertainment. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of our customers, they get themselves, their heads in the space of I am what I sell rather than I am how I create value.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge distinction. A lot of people don't really realize that the value created isn't always in what is delivered. Something else that I would say for our listeners to keep in mind with small and medium sized businesses is using these enabling technologies. So there's things out there. There's AI that you can bolt on your existing platform, and there's AI that you can bolt on. Even if you're a retailer, and there's geofencing. There's kind of clever ways to send ads out. So say I'm driving down a particular area and I start looking for, I need coffee. So there's geofencing ads that will pop up based on where I am, how close I am to the nearest coffee shop. And I think that most companies need to take advantage of these platforms that are being put out if they want to remain competitive and if they want to grow. One of the mantras that we talk about, Adam, and I mean, you are definitely the loudest loudest in the bunch regarding if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that company leadership needs to be focused on that growth. Even if you don't want to be a multi-billion-dollar company, you've got to be growing 10, 12, 15% just to keep the lights on. So I think that, maybe we can tie back the technology side to how it actually plays out with the day-to-day.
One of the things we're seeing happen at Netflix right now is they're experimenting with models that have ads built into them. Why? Well, because they're saying, hey, if there's a customer base out there that isn't able or doesn't want to spend this fixed amount of money per month for commercial-free entertainment, maybe I should reach out to them with an alternative solution. Maybe they would be happier if they had a lower price, maybe to the point of zero, but there were ads that were coming along so that they could get to the entertainment. That's not a strategic decision, actually. It's much more of a tactical decision. It's saying, is there an unmet need? And then how can I go out and try to meet that need? And can I use technology to make that happen? If we look at all of the technology that exists today for ad placement, between Apple and Google and Meta, I mean, these companies are very, very sophisticated. You can sit there and say, okay, Netflix could pick up some kind of this technology that would be appropriate and usable quickly, that could say, all right, for a group of customers that don't want to pay the monthly fee, here, I have another alternative. And then you could go to the advertisers and say, I'm now placing ads. You could just do them at the beginning. I mean, look at all the things we do on the internet where the first 5 seconds or the first 10 seconds is an ad. YouTube being a great example, where a lot of times you can't skip the ad for the little YouTube video you want to watch. So you've got a placement there, you've got placements in the middle, and then of course you've got placements at the end that you can try to run with. So the that technology for ad placement already exists, so you could grab it and run with it. And that's where I think a lot of our customers, they start, when you say the word technology, they just sort of lean back and they get scared and they say, but I'm not a tech company. And the reality is, well, yeah, you are. You're probably using QuickBooks, you probably got a cell phone that you're taking orders on. You're using the internet for placing orders and doing deliveries. So yeah, you are a tech company, but you're not maximizing the value of that technology for your customers.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain level of intention that needs to be made by the part of company leadership to really look at the value that they deliver to their customers, the actual value, and then the value delivery system. And then layer on top of that, and then integrate into that ways in which you can become even more of a tech company. If you're already out there selling something, but if you can augment your sales by providing content through a podcast, by engaging people with this geofencing advertising, by using these clever ways to identify new clients, these databases that exist. I mean, there's tons of ways and tons of things that are happening right now that you just need to be aware that they exist, but also be aware that you want to make them part of the way you do business. I mean, I've seen companies scale quickly because they had a product or service that got early awareness at a very fast scale. There's a guy I know that was making these little pucks to be able to put on your bike. So if your bike gets stolen, it's kind of like one of these Apple Tile things. And grew very quickly because it was not only hitting an untapped market, an unmet need, but also the other side was the awareness. He went viral on some social media things, and boom, there goes his business. So I think there's a lot of awareness, but it takes a lot of integration effort to make it part of your day-to-day operations.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people don't experiment enough. You know that I became unglued, unhinged in a podcast recently about CNN and Warner Discovery acquiring CNN and shutting down CNN Plus. And I was unhinged because I was like, this was a great platform for experimentation, for learning about customers, what they need, how to get them connected to CNN in a different way. Not everybody, most people don't sit and stream television. They'll turn on the TV and just run it all day long on a news channel. That was something that you did 40 years ago when, there was 3 broadcast channels and a half dozen cable channels, and so putting it on the news was the most entertaining thing you could have on if you just left it on all day long. But that's not where people are. They're consuming news, they're consuming this media in different ways. So CNN Plus was this great platform for doing the testing. Here are the leaderboards, they shut it down. And I said at the time, I said, this is a bad omen. Well, this last week, we just saw that same leadership team took the movie Batgirl and canceled it. So here was a movie that was already shot. It was in post-production. It was getting ready to go out. It had been created with the idea that it would be delivered on HBO Max, right? That was from the beginning. They said, that's going to be our platform. We're going to push this movie out on HBO Max. But here Warner Discovery comes in, the leadership that just doesn't believe in experimentation and thinks they know everything about everything. And they said, you know what? We aren't going to release movies unless they can go to the big screen. And since this one was intended for HBO Max, we're shutting it down. We're going to all the $70 million or whatever it was that had been spent to create it, we're just going to throw it away. And that's insane. It's just insane, and once again, I'm becoming unhinged, but it's because these leaders of Warner Discovery are trying to act like that they don't need to experiment. They don't need to be trying new technologies, trying new approaches, figuring out new ways to reach to the customer. So that's what it's really all about. It's how do you take the technology and take advantage of it to reach the customer, meet the unmet needs.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
The
way that people can consume entertainment is boundless this day and age. I mean, you can watch stuff on your phone. You can go to a local play. You can go to a movie theater. You can watch stuff at home. And so for them to just shut that down, and they must have got excited about what happened with Top Gun. Made a lot of money on the out in the big screen. But we've talked about the idea, and I've said this to some friends of mine that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson might be the last megastar, because now there's so many other stars like Mr. Beast and all these other TikTok people that exist. It's just a new framework. And the minute you start to realize it, the minute you can start to actually make some inroads, it's not status quo. It's not the way it was. It's changing. And I really loved the status quo conversation that, when you and I first met, Adam. I think that would be good for our listeners to hear about the whole defend and extend mentality.
Yeah, well, what happens again is you get stuck. The status quo mentality is, this is what I do. I do it every day, and I'm trying to figure out how to do more of it better, faster, and cheaper. And often I find that if you walked into a business and you said, hey, I've got $10,000 that I would like to invest in your business, the first thing they do is go get the to-do list of items they have to check off to do more of what they've done better, faster, and cheaper. Then instead of sitting back and saying, I've got $10,000, let me rethink. Let me see what kind of a new thing I could do, right? How would I approach my business differently? And now is a great time to do that, because in the last year, effectively, we've passed the infrastructure bill, we've passed the CHIPS Act, and now we've passed the Inflation Reduction Act, right? The reality is that we are in a recession. Go get any economics 101 textbook, look up recession. It says 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. Right, that's been the definition forever. There's a lot of politicians out there screaming and running around trying to say we're not in a recession because some board has to determine whether it's a recession or not. But the GDP shrunk. But now we've done this physical policy side through the legislature that's gone after green energy and green technologies and everything from how to charge up cars to solar panels to just you name it, in terms of how can we try to get away from fossil fuels. We've got an infrastructure bill saying, hey, we want to try to use money to improve the infrastructure of our roadways, our buildings, our telecommunications, our electric grid, all of these sorts of things, And then we've got this third piece, which is how we're going to try to, from a defense standpoint, protect the technologies and manufacture them in the United States so that we don't get strung out by China or another country again in the future because a critical component's made offshore. All of that is physical spending that's coming in. Now is the time for you to be thinking about, how am I going to grow? Yes, we're in a recession, but at the same time, the number of jobs went up 580,000 jobs last month. We saw the income, the average income is going up. Personal expenditures have been going up. The inventories are going up because we're solving the supply chain problem. So when you look at all this, you say, okay, it looks like, what we got is we have simultaneously this technical recession, but that's being resolved as the supply chain solutions come into place. Now, are you positioning yourself for this new wave of growth? Or are you sitting and looking backwards and saying, hey, I'm not going to do anything until I know we're out of recession. I'm not going to move until I can see. Well, by then it's too late, right? I mean, you're going to be chasing the market. Get out there in front of it today and start saying, hey, as people are still spending money, people are still getting jobs, what is it that they need, and how can I use technology to help them solve those needs?
When's the best time to plant a tree, Adam?
The best time to plant a tree? Isn't it today?
20 years ago or today?
Yeah. All right.
And we obviously can't go back in time, so you got to plant that tree today. I mean, it's one of these things. It goes back to the mindset. If you're really geared towards growth, if your company and your executives are rallying behind growth, then you will be able to put that big first step in the right direction to grow your company by looking at technology, by looking at trends, by looking at your own resources, but by your value, by your customers. And, all these things are captured in our course, Think Innovation, which, we offer as a way to grow your business and learn a lot about what Adam and I are talking about in a very succinct manner. It's all video content, easy to consume. There's some homework assignments in there. And I do have a piece of trivia for you, Adam. Guess what number podcast this is?
Oh, wow. Let me think. How long have we been doing? 150?
Today's 100.
100? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
How about that?
I just looked a second ago, and it's kind of cool that we're now, speaking of Roku, we're on Roku TV and Apple TV. Under the Futures TV channel, and we hope that you tune in. Our good friend Ram Goyoso is editor-in-chief of that network. And any final thoughts here, Adam? I mean, I think my thoughts are that every company needs to really assess and really put on those lenses of that you are a tech company, and if you're not seeing that, then you really have to take a harder, longer look in the mirror. Any final thoughts on your end, Adam?
I think oftentimes you need somebody from outside. You can't think outside the box. You have to get outside the box, then think. And oftentimes, if what we're saying rings true, that I really should be thinking of myself as a tech company, but I don't know how. You've got to reach out to other people, the people that aren't living your day-to-day existence, and ask them to help you understand where you're applying technology. Help them understand. Help point out to you your customers' unmet needs. Point out some of the opportunities that you may not even be seeing just because you're so busy running the business every day. So, I mean, the lack of willingness to reach out to external parties to get input always amazes me, because it's some of the most valuable input, almost always is the most valuable input you'll ever get is from an outside source.
Thoroughly agree, Adam. Well, thanks for your time, Adam. Happy 100th podcast, and we'll be talking to you next week.
Thank you.
Cheers.